Good afternoon here in Brussels. I invite you to come actually a little bit closer, if you don't mind, that we create a little intimate circle of those coming to this session. My name is Dennis van der Veur. I'm working at EIGE as its head of communication knowledge management. And I have the pleasure to run this session called The Conductor, a conversation with documentary director Bernadette Wegenstein, who I will introduce in a moment. We also have people watching online, so welcome to that. You can leave your questions in the chat or Q&A section, and we will integrate them in this session. I'm very happy that you joined this session. This is one of the ways for our forum to also introduce inspiring stories of great women in history and telling their story. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Bernadette Wegenstein, who joins us from Baltimore, if I'm correct.
Yes.
Hello, Bernadette. I don't see you yet, but I hear your voice. There you are. Yeah. Welcome.
Thank you.
Good. Yesterday you had a bit of a cold. Are you feeling better?
Yes, I'm feeling better. I mean, my voice will be a little dark as a result, but I'm fine.
Okay. Thank you so much for joining this session. I was just saying The Conductor, we will talk about it in a moment. Those that have signed up to the forum were able to see it online. I see some nodding here, which is good, so people have seen it. And for those who haven't seen it, you can watch it tomorrow afternoon here in Brussels on the spot. And also possibly on other occasions. The documentary has been going around the world quite a bit. So very congrats for that. Bernadette, I would actually like to start to introduce your wonderful production with a short part of the story that people get an idea of what the film is about. Yeah? So, if I can see the first 50 seconds of the trailer.
I think I was 9 years old. I went to my violin teacher and I said, you know, I saw this amazing conductor and I'm going to be the conductor. And she said, girls can't do that. Every day from that day when I saw Leonard Bernstein conduct, I thought, I'm never going to get to do this. Because everybody said, no, you can't. The world, the society, everything, no.
It was more likely for a woman to be a 4-star officer in the United States military than to lead a major American symphony orchestra.
The new conducting teacher, he said, you will never be a conductor. I said, Maestro, conducting is the only thing in life I want to do. And I saw him almost, and he said no.
Yes, a cliffhanger. We will find out later on if she has become the conductor. Bernadette, who is Marin Alsop and how did you find her and decide to tell her story?
Okay, so thank you so much for inviting me. Once again, I apologize for my voice, but hopefully this will not be a problem. So Marin Alsop is actually at the same institution that I am at, which is Johns Hopkins University, because she is also a professor for conducting at the Peabody Conservatory, which is the music school that belongs to Johns Hopkins. And so I'm from Austria originally, and I'm half Italian, half Austrian, but I've been living in Baltimore for the last 14 years because I teach here at the university. And of course, when I moved here, it was more or less the time that she moved here, by the way. I heard about her because she is, a big name. And also really because I'm from Austria, I was always interested in classical music. I grew up with it probably differently from other Americans. Because as you know, in Austria, I think classical music training is much more of a mainstream thing. And here in the States, it's quite an elitist thing, unfortunately. And So I went to see her at the BSO at the Baltimore Symphony Orchestra. So when I moved to Baltimore, people said to me, "Oh, you're from Vienna, so you must love classical music." And we have a great symphony orchestra here. And we just have this new conductor. Her name is Marin Alsop, and you should come see a concert. And I did, and I saw, I think it was Brahms. And I caught myself by being surprised that she was a woman conductor. And I thought, hoppla, there's something wrong with me, I just felt, so to speak, it is an image I hadn't seen in this way. And so I became very interested in this because, of course, in the meantime, I was always teaching feminist film, feminist media history. I had made other films about feminist issues. And so now I suddenly had like a great material to work with. And normally Marin will tell you the story from her end, because what was the happenstance and really the seed to start the project is that at the very same time, Marin got interested in the history, the forgotten history of Sylvia Kaduf, who is a Swiss conductor. And you see her very briefly in my end credits of this film. We made a TV version for Austrian television, where she has her own scene. But because it's in German and we already, there's various reasons why a scene doesn't make it in a film. One of them was definitely the language. But there were other reasons too. But at any rate, Sylvia was also an assistant to Leonard Bernstein, and she studied with Karajan, and she's now in her late 80s. So she's really a generation before Marin. And so Marin was looking to tell the history of Sylvia Kaduf, and she reached out to the provost at the university, and she said, I'm really interested in somebody interested in this forgotten conductor, Sylvia Kaduf. And the provost said, well, we have a filmmaker here, and she might be interested, and her name is Bernadette Wegenstein. And so then she contacted me via a dean, and I said, wow, this is too good to be true. And, documentary is sort of a medium that, of course, it's not really the truth you're saying and telling, because you have to condense the truth, and you have to sort of find your own dramaturgical ways. But it is about the truth. And for me, it's always a great sign if a character in my film wants something from me. They might not want the same thing that I want from them. But she did reach out about Sylvia. And, the long story short, in the end, I didn't make the film about Sylvia, but about Marin, because I thought she herself is a forgotten conductor.
Yeah.
And so why don't we start right here with this person that I have access to?
Yeah, and that you did, and the Conductor shows a remarkably chronological and intimate portrait of the struggles she went through in reaching her ambition. She was told at young age by some of her teachers, I don't believe you're authentic. I don't think you'll become a conductor. So she has, in the documentary, you show very well all the steps that she took us through. In working with her, you follow her to Baltimore, to Brazil, to Vienna. What in working with her struck you most in all the time you followed her?
Well, I think one of the things that struck me very much is how focused she is. And, she's not somebody who digresses. She's very much a conductor also outside of conducting. In fact, she is a conductor all the time, I found, which is what led to the fact that I used music in the entire film, her conducting, because she is that. Yes, we see a little bit behind the scenes, and we see her in private moments, but not for very long, usually. And that was because I wanted to stay true to the character. And as I just said earlier, documentary has a way to telling the truth that I find very interesting and very compelling, because you can make one little remark, and it will go a long way. So I found her focus, and she also has this saying that sort of stuck with me. Don't touch anything twice. So she's somebody who does something and then she lets it go as well. Yeah. So she isn't looking back and going and saying, oh, I should have said this, last sentence, she's always looking forward. And a great example of that is, you mentioned that we filmed in all these different locations. And, if anybody knows about laws around filming live concerts here and it's very complicated because they're all unionized. Yes, the music often, for the most part, our musicians had been dead over 60 years. So not Bernstein, for instance, but also not Lehrer Auerbach. So we had to commission some of the music rights. But mostly these are old composers, so they were dead. However, to get the synchronization rights, there are very special laws in every country, and Marin was really sort of playing along with it, and she really helped me get these rights, and she's just very efficient that way. I mean, she would say to the orchestras, this is a camera crew, and there's this 5-minute law that you can use 5 minutes of the performance. However, they have to film for 2 hours because then, we had to edit out 5 minutes, for instance. And in Vienna, I had wired some of the orchestra, chairs and such. And we had a DOP and we had a really huge crew for the Concerthaus, for the Concerthaus concert. And unfortunately, one of these little cameras, I think it was a GoPro, started beeping during the concert. And it was the most embarrassing and horrifying thing that I've ever experienced during my career as a filmmaker, because I wasn't able to get onto the stage. And so I had to communicate with the camera person. And in the end, she was able to fix it. But the director of the Concerthaus came to me and he said to me, backstage, he said, Frau Wegenstein, how do you think you're going to solve this? And I said, well, trying to solve this right now. I mean, I did try to make the joke that Hindemith was playing, which is a modernist composer. And Hindemith, I said, it could be part of the composition. And he didn't think that was very funny. And so then after the concert, or after the first half, when Marin came off, she looks at the whole situation. Everybody was looking at her and at this man and me. And she said, what's wrong with you people? Let's just move on. What's done, it's done. And it's fine. And we can re-record it tomorrow, she said, because this was also a live recording. And that was it. So, I think the way that she's also successful, and you can probably find this with any, not only woman who's successful, is that they're looking forward and they're not trying to make a big deal of something that happened in the past, because there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. In fact, she was 3 or 4 times rejected, I believe, before she was able then to enter becoming a conductor. And later on in the documentary, you then also show her working with young female conductors, giving master classes to them, and she's becoming, in the eyes of many that she works with, as a kind of role model. You were also part of those conversations. How was that to experience?
Yeah. So I think the role model part is extremely important, Dennis, because I think that's something that we all can, understand, because we all have role models. We had role models. I think that Marin, because there is no person in her role, which is a very established, famous female conductor, really took on the role for many women, but also other outsiders to the profession. People of color. She has African-American students. And so these are people who are self-conscious about being in this role of heading a orchestra. So this is nothing to do with the music, but it has to do with the expectation in the society to see a person who looks different doing this kind of profession. And I, as I told you at the very beginning, I found myself, as a audience member in this role of asking the question, why is she a woman? And so I could really understand how they needed not only the support of the role model, but also, it's a sheer number game. The more people you see doing a certain thing, the more you get used to it and it doesn't stand out. And so in terms of, gender representation and the analysis of gender, for me, it's always about, demarcation. So if something stands out and it's marked, you want to try and unmark it, but in a way that you're not pointing to it. It just has to be normal. That's when you have achieved the goal of sort of normalization. And that can only be done if you educate more people, outsiders in this profession, into it, or if you just habituate people and an audience and the world, with different faces for different content. And I think, Dennis, we have reached a really far point in the Western world for sure. I think at this moment there's a lot of work to do, of course, in many professions. But classical music is one of the most conservative branches still of, I wouldn't call it white supremacy because that sounds sort of, very negative. But it is definitely a very white profession. It's definitely a very male profession. And it is a completely unquestioned white male profession. And so this is really where her role modeling comes in big time, bigger than in other areas that are unusual, for women or for minorities to be seen.
Yeah. We see in the documentary, obviously, where she's headlines the moment that she becomes the first female conductor. We show in a moment a short part of that. What have you actually followed after the release of the documentary? If the situation in the sector has improved, are there more now more examples of female conductors?
Unfortunately, especially if you Google some New York Times articles that Marin has given interviews about, because she's very political as well. She constantly looks at those numbers. The situation hasn't changed in that it's actually been, she's no longer the head of the BSO, but now there's Natalie Stuhlman, who is a colleague of hers, an American conductor, who is, the chief conductor of one other major symphony orchestra. So we have the same situation. There's one woman, at the head of a symphony orchestra. And I think, at the BSO, for instance, they have a Black conductor who they brought in after Marin. So there are small baby steps that you can see in terms of diversity and diversification, but the number game does not pan out. It's not going to, impress anybody. However, this is the thing. This is where she has made history and she's a pioneer. She continues her program for young female conductors, and they find assistantships. There are more and more women in these not top roles, but in the second and third tier roles. But then, as you can see this in other professions too, it has to start with these other areas before the main top people are going to be normalized into minorities as well. So the answer is no, but there are baby steps on the way.
Okay. In a moment, I will invite audience here and online to also come up with some of your questions. One thing, what also struck me when I saw it, and you already hinted to it, this is about the cultural sector, the music world. Was that a deliberate choice to focus on that section, or was it also more or less how it came on your path, and how much it tells about the rest of society outside of this, what you just referred to as elitist, perhaps part of our societies?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as I said, this film and the story really came to me and I embraced it for a reason. So it's not like I want to be cultish and say, I'm more esoteric, that there's something I see out there and then I it's a sign for, I don't know, the world is going to come to an end. So I don't think that's that way. But I do think in symbols, as a filmmaker, as a semiotician, my first education was really semiotics and linguistics. So for me, I think about language and images. I have been, for my entire life. It was certainly for me a sign because, I told you I grew up with classical music. It was always an art that for me was very difficult to understand. I knew my grandparents were classically trained musicians, my grandfather an opera singer. However, this was during the Nazi era, and he didn't really, go very far in his profession. My mother was a pianist. My grandmother was a pianist. So, I was always attracted to this profession and to this musical world. I also knew that it had a dark history for me as an Austrian. So these were the predispositions that really attracted me to the field. But then, of course, the story told itself, because as I said, she was a classically trained musician who wanted to be a classical conductor. And so I was devoted and committed to my character. And if my character wants this, then what she wants is, so to speak, my attention, my love, my investigation, my research. Yeah, so this is how I work through another character's life in all my films. And Dennis, I couldn't tell you how happy this film made me, because I was able to study classical music for a year. I took tutor lessons at the conservatory here from a PhD student, and she taught me music theory. I really analyzed and read every score we used in the film. And I took apart, Mahler's symphonies to really understand how they are constructed. And in fact, they're so perfectly constructed, these symphonies, especially by Mahler, I think, that we sort of based the whole dramaturgy on Mahler's first, because as he himself said, all the human emotions are written into these pieces. They are like 19th century novels, they're these kinds of works that are trying to tell the ups and downs of humanity, and really they're trying to tell it all. And then whatever reason, another little signpost came to me. I reached out to an editor in Austria, because I had worked with editors here in America, and the same director of photography who I worked with at the Konzerthaus, Judith, she said to me, you should meet Stefan, because he works mostly for television at the moment, but he's a classically trained musician and an editor. And once I started working with Stefan, he's a violinist. The editing, of course, became a whole other dimension of getting into classical music, because we were able to suddenly, with his help really, rephrase certain pieces, right? Because this is a 90-minute film. Every symphony is about 45 minutes. So you have to really know what are you using and how are you continuing the motifs and how are they flowing into one another. I mean, we created a composition, actually, a score for the film, just from the music that she was playing. But this is something I could have never done without Stefan Fauland, who is an incredible editor and musician. So I was really able, I think, to recuperate a lot of this curiosity and love I had for music as a child. And I think it's often, as an artist in general, you go on certain paths that you have been on, you just didn't know you were.
Yeah, the movie is as much a dedication to the life of Marin and her becoming conductor, but it's also a dedication to music and the love for music that I think you managed very well. She worked with Leonard Bernstein. I mean, it's an incredible insight into all those big names. I would like to show another short part of the teaser that we have.
The sound of another glass ceiling being shattered by the first woman in history to head a major American symphony orchestra.
I'm good turning over control to you.
But not all the time.
Oh, this is such a surprise.
With Marin, we are widely seen as the most important Latin American professional orchestra today.
If you want strong, just make a fist. Not show it like that, but like this.
Being the first is a tough job. And I think this is why she's fighting so much for us.
It's like jumping into the darkness and trusting that you'll land on your feet.
Yes. It's great. For those who haven't seen it, go and see it. I know some of you in the room have seen it. Was there any time you felt when talking to her that she was tempted to give in of not becoming a conductor?
No.
Not a moment?
Absolutely not.
No.
Mm-mm. I was not. I mean, she does tell the story that we actually then edited out. There's a line when she said she was very young and she thought, maybe I'll be a mathematician. But I thought, well, you probably didn't think about that too long because, so look, I mean, again, of course, what is a great, I would say, and dangerous freedom often for a documentarian is to tell a story as it was. You know, it's because it's not like journalism. Mm-hmm. I'm not sort of bound to the same duties. My duties are always dramaturgy. How can I convey the kind of emotion that I want to convey? So you said it earlier. It's interesting you saying it because in our edit room, it was Marin is the conductor and her love of music becomes our love of music in the film.
Yes.
And these were my two mantras. And so every edit, every image has to speak to either of those two things so that, you know, I can construe this kind of film. And that the fact that she thought one day when she was 12 years old, maybe I'll be a mathematician, it didn't make it into these two categories. Yeah. And of course, you could say, as a journalist, I would have to be true to that more so than as a filmmaker, because here I can take the freedom to sort of edit that out. Because film is a tricky medium, something you hear, because it also works unconsciously, might stick with you for longer than you think. And so I thought this was a digression. Because the character I saw in front of me and that I researched in the archives, you know, her work is documented in the Boston archives, along with a lot of other celebrities in America, where I spent hours, days and days, to look through old VHS tapes, to transfer them, to read all of these articles written about her. All I could see in this archive is a conductor. I never saw anything else.
Good. Questions from some of you? I see some hands raised. Let's take 2 or 3, and then you can reply to them.
I'll write down the name.
And introduce yourself shortly, if you can.
Sure. So, hello, my name is Annika, and I work for the Society of Audiovisual Authors. So thank you very much for presenting your film, and I will look forward to watching it. I haven't had a chance to do that yet. So the society that I'm working for, we are representing authors' rights, specifically filmmakers' rights to the royalties for their works, so they also benefit from the success of the works. This is quite a challenge today when a lot of the works are online, and as you are based in the US, we know that there's a difference between the rights of authors in Europe and the US, and we are struggling to get the royalties that the authors deserve. That's our work. But I just wanted to ask a question about your, not so much about the film, but about yourself as a filmmaker. And when the very recent figures from the European Audiovisual Observatory, if you allow me, shows that female directors in Europe are 25%, screenwriters 28%, slightly more, and just for cinematographers and composers, it's only 10%. So the actual profession of filmmakers is also a very male-dominated one, although we do see that in education it's fairly equal. So it means that something happens when you enter the labor market, and there are many barriers for women to make it in access to their funding, in doing the films they want to do, and I'm sure you you have similar or your own thoughts and experience. So my question is very open to maybe reflect on you as a woman in a quite male-dominated profession. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much for this question, Annika. And I think your work is so important that you're doing to protect weak members of the of the author's world, and those are I think extremely important questions. I just want to tell you something maybe I will start with something very personal. I went to the Venice Film Festival in September because I was accompanying a friend who's a producer of a big Hollywood film called Bones and All, with Timothée Chalamet and the big bucks. And as I was there, I said, "Oh, Kate Blanchett is featured on every magazine as a conductor in this film Tar that has come out here already. I think it's about to start in Europe." And I mean, that film, you were just showing a clip, Dennis, with Mahler's Fifth, where Marin is, named the first conductor, and it's the same music that this film is using, not to mention the Bernstein clips from the young people's concert. Now, I was, of course, really freaked out, to say the least, when I saw this film coming out. And I don't want to go into detail about it, but I can tell you a little bit about the law here, because Marin's story is in the public domain, because she talks about it through my film, but also in other interviews, and the First Amendment laws here in America. So in other words, Hollywood can just go ahead and just take some ideas. They can change them a little bit, although they have a conductorship for women in the film called Accordion, and ours is called Concordia. And there are many, she's a lesbian conductor as well, this character. And so I think something that all my European partners in this film are saying, why can't you do anything about this? But we can't, because I don't own her story. And these are different sort of legal situations. To be honest, I stopped worrying about it, and Marin has given many interviews. The one thing that really bothers me is not so much the theft of ideas and editorial ideas, but the fact that the first story about a big woman conductor, the first, as it says in this film, of a German orchestra, has to be sort of a male abuser, because this character is on a power rush, and so she starts sleeping with her students, and she starts essentially abusing this power. And I just think it's a very cheap way that Hollywood has to portray a female character and blame her for this success when they never made a film about a male conductor before. Okay. So this is, in terms of the royalties, something that I immediately thought about. But otherwise, as a woman filmmaker in documentary, it's much easier to get funding, because, again, it's about the big tier and the little. So if I wanted to make a Hollywood film, then people would say, who are you if you want to have access to these kinds of budgets? But for a documentary, it's easier. What happens with that is that you keep women and minorities then to a certain tier, so in my tier I can be very successful, but then it's a question of confidence for me to step into the next tier. And in fact, I am actually developing my first narrative film right now, and I can already see in myself and in the fundraising plans not only the difficulties, but also sort of the lack of confidence, because I just don't know how to proceed. I have never done this. And so in that sense, there's a lot of work to do here, even if our numbers might be slightly better than maybe in Europe. Although I think especially in the Benelux countries and in Austria too, they have special funds for content that is about women, where crew members are female. And so these attempts and these ways to changing the profession are definitely helping and working. But Annika, the last thing, and I don't want to take too much time here, sorry to be so lengthy about this really important question, is that you can, of course, institutionalize this financial help the funding landscape, let's say. But then it comes down to also instilling confidence in people to even apply, because they might think, oh, I would never qualify. And Marin has this one sentence in the film that also Jane Campion says, she's the first woman to really be a female auteur, where nobody says, oh, why is she an auteur and a woman? Nobody wonders about this anymore. And I'm actually writing a book about Jane Campion right now, so I know her work very intimately. Both of these pioneer women are saying that you need to be given many chances. You need to be given the chance to fail. In fact, Marin says 1,000 times. And you need to feel, okay, I'm just going to try again. Because if you give somebody once a chance, they have to be so good, to really convince the audience and the world that they can do this. Most people don't have that kind of energy, and you can't blame them. Yeah. And so it's really a question of how many such opportunities there are. And I think that's where the difference really lies.
Thank you. We had a second question here.
Hello. My name is Dragana, and I'm coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from one civil society organization that works, among others, on gender equality improvement in our country and in region. And my question is, I know it takes time to make documentary movies, and although I haven't seen this movie yet, but I hope I will, I wonder in total how long did you film this documentary? And I'm also curious, I'm not so familiar with classical music, I'm not coming from musician family, but who was actually the first female conductor? Wasn't it Antonia Bricco? Or, I don't know, that's what I heard. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so there are, there are definitely, for instance, Alma Mahler, the wife of Gustav Mahler, she was a composer, but also a conductor. Those were the times that she wasn't able, and in fact, apparently she chose not to be in the profession so that her husband could be. Alma Bricco was definitely a pioneer. I would have to lie right now to tell you this is the first one, but there are, of course, these 19th century conductors, female conductors. After Marin, then there is Sylvia Kaduf, and at her age, I think she was one of the only ones. Now, I think I need to sort of, Dragana, I need to also distinguish between, somebody who goes out into the world in this profession and somebody who is conducting, because of part of a musical education. And so that's, again, going back to the previous question. There were plenty of women conductors, but they didn't have a podium, They didn't have a podium where they shared their work. And so at the beginning of my research, I was trying to tell the whole history of women conductors, the forgotten history, as you said. And then Bricco would have been one of the ones actually I did look into. There were others as well. I ended up making it just about this one person, because I thought that it's more, sort of emotional to go on the journey with her and with her rejections and her difficulties to then find out about these other women. And the other question about the length, it took 5 years. So it's about a year of development of the project. And during this time, I was taking all these conducting classes that you see only 2 scenes of in the film. But I took the classes myself, and I took music lessons. And so I prepared about a year of research, which I was able to do since I live here anyway. And I was, sort of immersed already in this community at the university, And then it took 2 years to produce the film. And it took about, it took maybe a year and a half to edit it, but because, you take all sorts of different times and chunks. But one thing I want to say is that I was able to really finalize it all during the pandemic, which was Many people suffered in many different ways during the pandemic. One advantage we had, me living here in Baltimore and Stefan living in Vienna, was that at one point I was just, I flew over there and we were just editing for a month in one place. And that was a real big advantage to that. But we also worked, via Zoom a lot. So it takes a long time. And then I would say another half a year or so to bring the film out. I mean, it premiered at Tribeca in 2021, and you see that in the trailer. Of course, we have played now 70 or 80 festivals in the meantime. And, we won many audience awards and all that. So if you count sort of the festival circuit and for the film to find its audience, to find its awards and all these things, this is about the time span, 5 years.
Okay. I saw another question here, I believe also from somebody who has seen the movie. Congratulations, the previous speaker says to you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So my name is Bettina Pfleiderer. I'm the Vice President of the European Women's Lobby. And in my other life, I'm a professor at med school, I'm a physician, and I'm teaching gender and music and medicine at the Medical School of Münster for pre-clinical students. And as I'm specialized in gender, I looked actually in all this question about the music business and about Antonia Bricco, you just named. I thought it was really amazing because she had got no chance to really conduct a big orchestra until the war hits. And what she did, she was able, because all the musicians went to the army, so she was the first one, she got an all-female orchestra. And then, everybody wrote about it in the New York Times, and they said, oh, it's amazing, a woman and female, musicians, and they can play this great of music, so you could tell. So she had really to wait for the war in order to even, to get something going. But my question now is, because I think we have to look at this story of a conductor in the broader sense, because it means, so my question is, what do you think your film may have changed in the minds of people in general? Because you said you got this great success, it's got many awards. I love, by the way, the movie, it's great, it's fantastic. But do you think it really changed the structures of the mindset of people? Because the music business is very stereotyped. The type of instrument someone chooses, like the brass is more male-dominated, and if a woman plays the brass, everybody says, oh my goodness, can she really do it? And stuff like that. The harp is like the typical feminine instrument, and I think the music business in Europe, but as well in the States, is very still in males dominated. Do you think you changed it, or what could have been changed by that?
Thank you. Also, for expanding on Antonia Bricco's career and, the happenstance of her, of finding an audience. And so listen, honestly, even though my film was, successful for being a little documentary film, I don't think it changed anything that I know personally. I also think that as a filmmaker, while I'm always interested in social justice in my films in one or another way, or in feminism, I'm not thinking about when I make it, how can I change something? I like to show something, and I show a world, in this case, the world of this character, this compelling character. And I haven't had, documentary is a medium where you're preaching to the converted. I mean, you'll go to see this film because you already are interested in this topic, right? So in other words, I don't think this is the medium that really changes the world. However, it is a contribution to that. It's my contribution. So I think there are institutions like EIGE, like your own institution, that is actually allying, as you say, the women's. It's a European Women's Alliance institution. I'm sorry about my voice. That helps women maybe find jobs or show their work. I think political work, in other words, is really what changes people's minds. journalism, we did have a lot of articles written up about the fact that we had not heard from this profession. So, you know, it might even be said that in small ways, this changed somebody's mindset. But this is already written in the New York Times, so it's not like, you know, it's a reader who didn't know anything before, right? So I think it's very difficult, to be honest. Media are so segregated, right? So you have this medium that will speak to an audience like yourself, you know, who is in this field, and then you have a Hollywood film like Tar that sort of simplifies and, quite frankly, puts back a certain, you know, misogyny actually into the picture that is then made for a very wide audience. I do think it's really a problem. And in that sense, I don't think that my little documentary has changed the institution. But I think that I didn't really go in there with this task. I went in there to tell this particular story in the best way I could.
Thank you. If I may link a little bit to this, we ask you as part of our 3 Steps Forward campaign to formulate your 3 steps forward. And I would like you to say a few about, I think, one of the 2 that you mentioned there, where you emphasized, you know, representation and participation of women in all phases of film and documentary making. And I found that very, I mean, it may be your and perhaps small step forward, but I think it's a very important one. So giving agency to female and other minorities or minorities movie making. That is perhaps, these are small steps, but I would love you to say a few words on how you do that.
Sure. I mean, so in my crew, I try to, as you said, I try to build it up with people who are women, usually, you know, like I try to, let's say if I have 2 applicants and one is a young man, one is a young woman, then I try to give the job to a young woman because of affirmative action. And so it doesn't mean that I need to negatively exclude others. But I do think that there is something about the making of an artwork, you know, where every single thing that happens, you know, on a set or in a crew will also sort of affect the product because, you know, art is that way. It's not something you can really easily control. And so I try to really include people, women and other minorities, really. At the moment, I work with several gender fluid crew members, and you know, I have to be reminded of their pronouns. I have to be reminded and mindful of their transitions. One is transitioning from male to female, and they wanted to be called they, and now they're she, and so we have to all learn to honor this transition and this wish. I do think that that whatever you do on a daily basis, right, and whatever surrounds you will influence what you do. So if I only see, you know, this color outside, you know, it will influence my mood. It will, and so I really am very conscious of who am I with and who do I spend time with creating films, and I think it's very important. Female DOPs have been, you know, there were 2. I mean, the main one, the conductor was Shauna, and she's a LA-based director of photography. And I worked also with another one in Vienna, Judith. But then I had one, you know, a good friend and a male cinematographer here in Baltimore for all the stylized super close-ups of her hands. He's actually a cinematographer specializing in birds, and then you know, he has won Emmys for National Geographic. So I brought him along to really give us this sort of intimacy visually with this action that Marin is involved in. And so he's a man, so that's totally fine, you know. So I don't think you can be too strict about it, but there needs to be a certain thought process about you know, who are you giving the chance, and who, you know, and who's on your team.
Clear. There was another question.
Hi, Bernadette. This is Valbona from Albania. We talked
yes.
over
Hi,
email
Valbona.
because
Yes.
we tried to arrange an interview with Bernadette, but we agreed that we'll do another time.
Yes.
Just to present myself for the audience, that I'm a former TV journalist, turned into a civil society activist for gender and media, and a media researcher. We have recently established an organization in Albania called Albanian Women in Audiovisual, whose mission is to advance gender equality in audiovisual sector. And I have just produced my first documentary. It is not little.
Congratulations.
It is To Raise Above Violence, and it is about the journey of 4 survivors of domestic violence in Albania. But when I have noticed the work of other documentaries dealing with women topics, I have noticed that usually there are female directors or women directors or women journalists writing or making films about other women. Do you think that this comes from a missing curriculum in our schools, movie schools or journalism schools, that gender equality is a topic for all? So how can we move out from making films about women only by women? Can also men be involved in this? And how we can correct this imperative? Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you, Valbona, and nice to meet you. I don't see anybody in the audience, but it's okay. I know we will meet soon by Zoom. First of all, congratulations on your documentary about a very important topic. Domestic violence would probably be one of the most drastic reasons for women to, never have a confidence, to go out and do something, because they will be permanently damaged psychologically for the rest of their lives if they even survive this. So I think it's one of the biggest issues. And making a film about this topic is so important because it takes place behind closed doors. And so you do need this access as a filmmaker to enter these doors and to enter into this very, very difficult situation. I would love to see the film. By the way, I'm also in post-production with a film about sexual violence. Called Devoti Tutti. It's an Italian title because it deals with a saint and the cult around a saint in Sicily, and the cult is really rooted in violence against this woman's body, and particularly her breast amputation. So I think we will have something to talk about in common about that. Now, the question of how can you make young men also go out and tell stories about women? First of all, I do think that there's no rule. I think that you can be a man or a transgendered person, or you could be gender fluid, or you could be a woman, or even a femme. You can be anybody to tell any story. I really don't think that there are any boundaries, and that there should be. However, I do think that a lot of, especially documentary film, is a medium that has to do with the lived experience. Not only documentary. I have a book that I wrote, an anthology called Global Feminist Filmmakers, about 16 women around the globe. They're feature and documentary filmmakers. And they talk about, one of my questions to all of them was, about the lived experience and to which extent that lived experience informed them in their filmmaking. And so in that sense, Valbona, I think it's sort of a natural that women are closer to a particular female lived experience, maybe of their, parents, ancestors, friends. And so naturally, often, you will find that the lived experience will also be sort of the gender of what the story will be about. But I think this is really because of access, because of the emotional connection that comes from having maybe witnessed something or having seen something. I absolutely agree that you need to include and in fact encourage. There needs to be affirmative action the other way. In other words, young men need to have some sort of a maybe benefit, or they need to get funding in order to encourage them telling these kinds of stories, right? So this is how you can change the landscape, only like that. And having built as you say, a civil society activist group in Albania that encourages others to make films, I think is extremely important. And by the way, I do give workshops also at times pro bono, for feminist filmmaking approaches or approaches that have gender in their focus. In fact, I'm going to Hungary very soon to do that. At the CEU. So I think that you need to, you need to include any resource you can find to encourage, and ideally, of course, change the curriculum in schools so that it is a mandatory thing. But I don't know the school system in Albania. I do know the school system in Austria, for instance, and whenever I'm back, I feel like nothing has changed in all these years that I went to school. So you need the political work and the work that, in fact, your institutions that each of you are representing are doing to change that.
Thank you. I saw one or two other hands, and there's still time for one or two questions, please. Introduce yourself. Sorry that you cannot see them, Bernadette, but we'll make a photo of you, of the group.
Okay. Yeah.
Hi, hello. My name is Lea Paco. I work for UN Women, but I'm coming more from a personal side. And I have a question on the so-called leaky pipeline, because I think we can also apply that to the musical world, classical music world. And thinking of, how classical music is often seen as a more, for kids, from more a girls thing, where you see that little girls are enrolled and signed up for musical classes, whereas little boys will go play soccer. The whole stereotype thing for kids. And then when you go up to professional studies, there's immediately a shift. And you see from 90% girls, you see young women, it drops to more or less 50-50, sometimes depending on the instrument, sometimes even much, much less. And then you arrive in conservatories where you see that 90% of the teachers are also male. And again, when you look at the orchestras, similarly, you see so many men. It's starting to change, obviously. But, this leaky pipeline, when it starts from such a young age, the shift is so fast because it happens really at 18, 19. So you haven't had the experience of a working experience with sexual harassment that may occur. So what are the factors that, where does this happen? When does this happen? Is quota something that could, work not only for conservatories, but also for orchestras? Can we see that as, almost like private sector companies and put these quotas? So I know the screen is there to help prevent these biases, but we still see that, it's huge and we see this so starkly. Yeah. So thanks.
Absolutely. I think that, if you look at film schools, Leah, it's the same thing. You have all these women enrolled. Actually, more women are enrolled in film schools in America than men. But then you look at, the male directors. There's this wonderful performance, really, that Jane Campion did at the Oscar speech of 2019, where she says, "I'm here to honor Lina Wertmüller, the first female director to ever receive an Oscar." To be nominated to an Oscar, because she was actually nominated and didn't get it in 1975. And so she said, the history of female directors is very short. It's, 5. And then she went on, in sign language, actually. And it was really beautiful because she went on and on and on to count the men who had been nominated. And she went on and on. And so, I do think that, there are equal amounts of kids of any gender and curious about any profession, in my opinion. This is not just music. This is also applied math or other, historically more male gendered professions. And then exactly what you're saying happens, that suddenly, they don't make it to the top. And I think there are two reasons personally. And here, again, I'm just the documentary filmmaker, and I consider myself more of an artist, really. I'm also an academic, but then I write more qualitative research, so statistics and quantitative research is just not my field. I think it's extremely important to have these numbers as you do. But I can give you sort of my interpretation of what happens. And we've already talked about it. One is confidence, because you can't just have the curiosity be out in the nowhere and many competitions that the kids need to go through. As you know, the classical music testing is extremely rigorous. So there needs to be, I would say, a societal atmosphere built in so that these girls are also feeling confident to maybe not succeed in this one exam and then to pursue another one. But no, they will drop it because they are not allowed to fail 1,000 times, as Marin says it. And so, they will disappear, and it's a lack of confidence that does that. And I can tell you from my own experience, I've always wanted to write a narrative film, a historical film, and I'm finally doing it. But I'm already in my early 50s, it's like, what was I waiting for, And I'm a relatively successful person, and I don't really have a huge confidence issues. So I can only imagine what happens to somebody who doesn't have the kind of, knowledge and education, all the things that I have. They wouldn't say, oh, yes, I'm going to write a narrative film, because they would think, I will never be successful with it and I don't want to fail. So in my opinion, that's really why this happens. So what we need to build are environments where people feel comfortable failing, and where they're not being told they're failing, but that this is just one step of the way. And the other thing is what Dennis mentioned, the role model. Because you do, I think, as a teenager, and that kind of age, you do want to sort of identify with certain personalities. And so, I get a lot of emails from high school students as a professor at Hopkins, because here it's so insane, the competition to get into colleges in America. It's quite honestly one of the things I hate most about this culture here, because it's a humiliation ritual for every 18-year-old that they have to go through. Again, talking about rejection. And so I get all these emails from young women especially, but also men, to say, oh, can we intern with you? Because it really helps in their application if they say, if interned with somebody. And I tend to actually take all these, and it's a little crazy because I have children of my own who are teenagers. They say, who is this? Who is Zinja? And I said, well, she's just here for the day to be on this film shoot. So I try to perform as a role model for young women, because I think it's something that then they can put in their head very easily, right? Of course, what Marin does as a role model is completely on a different level, because again, there's nobody.
Yeah. Yet at the same time, Marin is doing master classes for women conductors. You do it in your way, and in a way, as Marin was also saying in the movie, which I found a very striking quote, when she was being told, "You will never be a conductor on the age of 23." Her key response now is never ever turn your back to a person when it comes to you at an early age to make such a comment. So I think both of you are role models in that regard.
Yes, probably true. Yes, thank you.
Last question from Irena. And perhaps a small one from Milana afterwards.
Hello, my name is Irene Donadio, and I work for the International Planned Parenthood Federation European Network. First of all, thank you for this very inspiring moment together. I have a lot of takeaway that really lift me and cheer me up at this difficult time. I have a specific observation, because our friend from Albania was saying that typically women are made by women. Although I was thinking the last movie on Marilyn Monroe life is not done by a woman, and Margaret Thatcher movie wasn't done, I think, by a woman. And there are many others. The big movies tendentially are not made by women. And there also controversy around the content and how they're depicted, what is picked or not picked. If it's a woman for some reasons, if it's a man for other reasons. I also hear very often now that there is a lot of woke culture. So if you start seeing, oh, look, in this movie, one is black, one is a woman, one is like this, one is like that. And it's like, it seems that it's a bit of despising thing, like, oh, yeah, they're doing this character because they want to be politically correct, because now it's topical. But, we got enough, because they don't have the same talent, or the story is not told anymore as a real story. It has to be fitting a certain political shift and culture. And I think that this is very unfair, but it's happening. So on the top of the normal pressure, there is this other pressure that when you make it, it's just because now it's kind of trendy. What is your answer? Yeah. Of course, I don't think you have to answer for the universe, but just your perspective.
No, I understand. I think this is so really nice to meet you. I don't see you again, Irena, but I'm happy about this question, because it's a very complex one. And I can see it even in my young students, when they take a documentary class and then they start sort of stereotyping and, checking off the boxes. I think it's a good problem to have, first of all, right? So I would say, okay, this is a little bit of a problem that we are having right now, but it is clearly one that we have to have, because people feel responsible and they feel they have sort of a power of representation. They can decide as a writer who are they showing, and I think it's nice to see that young people, for instance, in my classes, feel this responsibility. I have I've only one white boy in my class right now in the documentary class. Everybody else is Black or Asian or sort of a minority here in America anyway. And so Christian, he was saying the other day, I don't feel comfortable writing these lines for this character because, I'm just a white boy. And it was very sweet. And I had to sort of talk it through with him. And I said, Christian, you don't need to feel intimidated by this. And you can definitely, you have the right and you have even the duty. This goes back to, to Valbona's question, I encouraged him and I sort of showed him and I paired him up with this girl, Sierra, and, they worked it out. So I think there is this problem, but it's a good problem to have. And I think the only way, again, I think it goes back to this question of the lived experience. If the lived experience of a minority person or a person of color is so public and we all have access to, anybody will start writing stories about them. But if they're not available as stories, then we're not able to identify with them and draw from them and build them out. So I think it's a transitional problem to have. And I resist very much, especially my Austrian country women and men, when they say, yeah, well, this is just like political correctness. And in America, they try to represent, but and I said, yes, that might be true, but it's a good problem to have, because what you're doing is nothing. So is this better? I don't know. Then the question of when powerful, Hollywood filmmakers are making films about, awkward women, like even, I was surprised, for instance, even the Chilean auteur, Pablo Larraín, who makes a film about Lady Diana Spencer, and it's a film really about the otherness of this woman and her psychotic state, and it's really very well done. Do I think it's stereotyping women, this kind of cinema that comes with a lot of money at showing how women are other, whether they're princesses or prostitutes? And I'm thinking of the opening film of the Venice Film Festival, quite honestly, that really took me off my chair. In fact, I left because it was so sexist. And I thought, hello? I mean, I can't even believe this, showing a group of Black prostitutes, I think from Ghana in Rome, with male white clients who then teach them the Cinderella story, that they don't have to be prostitutes. So that was, Venice 2022. A film that was made with a lot of money. And I'm just thinking, it can't be true that this is happening. So there, I wish I was a journalist or was one of you who are in these institutions that are actually able to say, hey, this is just not okay. We need to do something. So yes, I do think that the big films, they are driven by so many market questions, because they need to make money and they need to satisfy the mainstream. And so that then often, they're really, they can't but stereotype these representations. And so it's a very complicated question right there that we could talk about this for a long time, but I want to just kind of cut it here.
Yes. Also, we came to the end of the conversation, Bernadette. We will talk on with you, hopefully at some other time. I listened very carefully also to your future projects. It's music to my ears, to our ears, how you are telling these beautiful human stories in your work. And I think also for institutions like ours, it's very important that we keep on looking in the role of arts in the broader sense, but definitely in documentary and movie making. We offer this program, by the way, together with colleagues from the This Human World Film Festival in Vienna, your beloved Vienna. So for those who haven't seen the Conductor yet, please go and see it tomorrow afternoon here on Spot, or find any other opportunity to see it. It was great talking to you, many lessons learned. Also what you just said in terms of the role of the media and journalists. We have a journalist thematic network here at the Institute that will meet later today, so we will continue some of the conversations. Bernadette, in a short time, it was very nice connecting to you and with my colleagues and you, and I hope that we stay in touch. Anything, last word you would like to say to us or the audience?
Just thank you. This was a wonderful conversation. I really loved every single question and intervention from your audience, and I'm just really very thankful, and I wish you a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. All right.
Have a good day in Baltimore. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
And thank you to the audience. Thanks a lot.